Chapter 13. Setting nets with Gaza fishermen while facing down the Israeli Navy. Unfortunately, our big mistake was not having either still cameras or video. We will bring these supplies, plus megaphones, which we will use exactly like the Israeli war vessel does. I consider these essential for future fishing missions. Israeli naval vessels firing on unarmed fishing boats and human rights workers. Off the coast of Gaza, the 1st of September 2008, Israeli naval vessels are currently firing on unarmed Palestinian fishing boats and international human rights workers off the coast of the Gaza Strip. The fishing boats are several miles off the coast of Gaza City, in Palestinian territorial waters. As of 11 a.m., 4 a.m. Est, no one had been injured, but live ammunition is still being fired in the direction of the civilian boats. The unarmed boats went to sea at dawn this morning, in an attempt to fish in their own waters. 6 international human rights workers from 5 different countries accompanied the fishermen in the hopes that their presence would deter the Israeli military from firing on the fishermen. In the past, the Israeli military has shot and killed unarmed Palestinian fishermen for trying to fish in their own waters. International human rights observers accompanying the fishermen are Vittorio Aragoni, Italy; Georgios Karatsas, Greece; Adam Qvist, Denmark; Andrew Munsey, Scotland; Donna Wallach, USA; Darlene Wallach, USA. Posted at www.freegaza.org, web link. Unarmed fishing boats and human rights workers. YouTube video, shooting on Palestinian fishing boats. Despite these intimidations, the fishing was rich and profitable. We brought ashore quantities of fish 10 times greater than the Palestinian fishermen's usual catch. September 9th, 2008. Tomorrow another fishing day in Gaza territorial waters has been organized. On board with us, we will have the first German television channel, and some Arab journalists. The world has to know, to open its eyes, react, and face up to what is happening just few miles away at sea from Gaza coasts. In the attached video, which was shot by one of my partners on board, it's clearly visible how our fishing boat was bombarded from machine gun fire coming from an Israeli warship. These kinds of attacks occur almost daily. Murders and wounding of Palestinian fishermen, who are only guilty of trying to sail more than 3 nautical miles from the shore, have occurred. This limit is an illegal and arbitrary one imposed by Israeli authorities. The Oslo agreements established that the maximum limit is 20 miles from the coastline, and the Bertini Agreement, stipulated in August 2002 between UN and Israel, set this distance at 12 miles. Some days ago, our presence on board as internationals avoided death or wounding of Palestinians. We wish that tomorrow the presence of television cameras will work as a deterrent for any criminal Israeli action. We, non-violent people, will accompany non-violent fishing boats at a distance not more than 10 miles from the coast. Their fishing is one of the few sources of nourishment for a destroyed Gazan economy. In the 1990s, when fishing boats could sail from the Strip's coast and reach a distance equal to 12 miles, fishermen could bring ashore, sell, and also export almost 3.000 tons of fish every year. In 2007, just 500 tons of fish were harvested from more than 3,500 professional fishermen along the 40 kilometers of the Gaza Strip coast. Now, from among these 3,500 fishermen, just 700 are still working today in an economical field that was able to sustain at least 40,000 people as mechanics, fishmongers, and thousands of families of local fishermen. It's always more difficult to find fish in the sea close to the Gaza Strip's coast. Pollution and extreme exploitation has made this water contaminated and void of much commercial fish. This is one of the reasons why tomorrow we will accompany the fishing boats far from the seashore, hoping for another miraculous day of fishing. The ability to sail 20 miles out would allow Gaza fishermen the chance, during the springtime, to meet schools of sardines migrating from the Nile Delta to the Turkish Sea. Staying at less than 6 miles from the coast is almost impossible for them to find large groups of fish. According to the Palestinian Center for Human Rights, Israel never allowed Palestinian fishermen to sail and reach the 20 miles established by the agreements. Gaza fishermen state that they cannot go beyond more than 2.5 miles without being exposed to the risk of Israeli gunfire and the risk of having boats and nets destroyed while Israeli patrols push them toward shore. This situation, which has been going on since 2003, has worsened during the last years with the presence of Israeli rockets and helicopters used against the fishermen. According to the Rafah Fishermen's Union, Israeli warboats patrol the sea in the southern part of the Strip 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, under the pretext of keeping security and fighting weapons traffic. During 2007, more than 70 fishermen were arrested, their boats destroyed together with nets and fishing equipment. For months, thousands of fishermen didn't have the permission to leave the port. In a report published by Israeli human rights group B'Tselem, some fishermen's stories were collected. Ismail Balil was fishing on the 1st of January 2007 with his brother Samir and his friend Ayman al-Jabbar. In the distance they saw an Israeli warship approaching. After stopping at less than 30 meters from them, it started shooting into the air. The Israeli captain then ordered Ismail to follow them for 6 kilometers, to turn off engines and swim in cold water toward them. The warship was slowly moving away, and Ismail was about to drown. The rest of the story reported by B'Tselem is about bound arms and legs, threats and intimidation, sleep deprivation, and demeaning and inhuman treatments. Adnan al-Badwal described also his misadventure when he was fishing with his brother at 5 a.m. They had just pulled up the nets with the fish when they heard some shooting in the dark. The boat was hit, it started oscillating, and then both men fell into the water. 3 members of the crew were wounded and treated for 3 days in the hospital. But, despite all the risks for their own lives, Gazan fishermen still go out with their boats and try to go over the 3-mile limit. They feel they have to in order to survive. Nowadays they often can only use rowing boats, since there is no more fuel in Gaza. This is not due to the high price of oil, but because Israel doesn't allow fuel to enter the Strip. Israel keeps pushing forward an embargo that appears as a general collective punishment for an entire population. Tomorrow we will dedicate our fishing day to 3 fishermen who, some days ago, were arrested and, against the religious laws of Ramadan, forced by the soldiers to eat and drink, breaking their fast and their religious commitments. We will mainly dedicate it to 2 fishermen recently wounded, Muhammad Ani as-Sultan, 19 years old, and Hussam as-Sultan Diani, 32 years old, who was hit in his head and still in critical condition. These crimes can no longer remain in silence. Please, spread the video. And stay onshore as offshore, human. Stay human. Vittorio Aragoni. Video, www.youtube.com weblink. Update from Gaza on fisherman accompaniment this past Saturday. Andrew Munsey, Scottish national and human rights worker. September 9, 2008. On Saturday the 6th of September, human rights workers from the Free Gaza movement and the International Solidarity Movement again accompanied Palestinian fishermen on their fishing boats in Gaza territorial waters. It was just 9:30 in the morning, and we were only 4 miles out to sea, having barely left Gaza's coastline behind, when the Israeli gunboat's heavy machine gun opened up, spraying the wake around our hull with bullets. There was no surprise. We'd just spent the previous 10 minutes watching as this same gunboat harried another vessel from our fishing fleet. It would accelerate into an attack run, only to veer off at the last moment before collision, battering the fishing boat with its wake. It would pull alongside screeching threats and commands to stop over the megaphone. Throughout, its machine gun barked menacingly, peppering the air and water around the boat with bullets. When our turn came, our skipper just stuck steadfast to his course, neither slowing down nor speeding up. The crew continued preparing the nets, only pausing briefly to consider the crack of the machine gun and the trajectory of the bullets that were coming their way. This morning they were determined that they were going to fish. They had to fish. How could they stop and turn back now? Why would they stop when they hadn't even reached the so-called 6-mile limit? This is not some agreed perimeter, not some internationally recognized boundary, indeed not even a border, that had ever been officially declared or communicated to them, but just an arbitrary and elastic space delineated with the threat of gunfire. And of course this gunboat was probably just toying dangerously with the fishing boats as others, like it had done so often before. These shots were most likely simple warning shots. Not like those that hospitalized 2 fishermen 3 days ago. Not like those that killed 14 of their colleagues in the last few years. If you are a Gaza fisherman, you can never be sure when it will be your time to get injured or shot. As expected, the gunboat got bored, perhaps even embarrassed with its failure to force some sort of response. It withdrew and began patrolling slowly back and forth, as if nothing had happened. This respite was welcome but brief. In the early afternoon, another gunboat appeared on the horizon, heading in our direction at full speed. It tore in and out of our fleet again and again, weaving between our boats, as if we were flags in a slalom ski course. A few bursts from its machine gun, and it left, just as promptly as it had appeared. Before long the light began to fade. All in our fleet were heading back to Gaza City while dragging their nets for the last time that day. We waited eagerly in anticipation of iftar, the time when we could break our fast. 2 of the men had already begun preparing the Ramadan supper, frying fish and prawns from that day's catch. We gazed out across the sea, calculating how long it would be before the low sun finally met the horizon. Suddenly, another gunboat appeared with a definite menace apparent in its speed and course. Its cannon roared twice, the shells narrowly missing one of the leading boats, exploding in the water. Tracer bullets then pierced the dim light streaking across the sky, just as the gunboat swerved again, and went in for another target. Its cannon roared a 3rd time, and we tried to film, but the light was now so dim, and the boat far away. But it mattered not. The fishermen insisted we stop, because the Ramadan supper was ready and their course was already set. From Bella, Israeli gunboat rams Palestinian fishing boat. Thursday, the 11th of September 2008. The last day I went out fishing, the Israeli gunboats shot at us for a while in the morning. They threatened in Arabic over the megaphone to arrest the fishermen and take them to Israel. This happens constantly and sometimes the boats are damaged or sunk after the arrests. They threatened to start shooting directly at the boat, but they didn't. It's common for boats or fishermen to be hit. They actually went and sat on the horizon for most of the day, after announcing more politely in English, "This is a closed area. You must leave." OJ responded over Channel 16 that these were Palestinian waters, over which they had no jurisdiction, and they were firing upon unarmed people. As the sun set, the sea turned silver, and the fishermen served up the day's catch. To break the Ramadan fast, the gunboat came back for a special Ramadan drive-by shooting before heading home, the flash of automatic fire drawing a line toward the bow, where I was filming, wondering if they were going to stop when they reached me in the boat. They did, to begin again at the other end of the boat, and follow it up with a few explosion-type things. Then they went home for their dinner too, we presume, and we ate our fried fish. Our first catches were small, but the last one very big, so the fishermen were happy. Then yesterday, Israeli military gunboat rams an armed Palestinian fishing vessel. Gaza coastal waters, 10th September 2008, an Israeli military gunboat rammed an unarmed Palestinian fishing vessel today at high speeds. The gunboat mashed through the upper hull of the fishing boat, careened over the top, and landed on the other side. Extensive damage was caused by the impact to the fishing boat. The hull was badly damaged, and virtually the entire deck area, all the equipment on it, and the canopy above the deck were severely damaged. Unusually, all of the crew happened to be in the cabin, or at the fore at the time. Had they been on deck they would have had little chance of survival. Via a megaphone, the Israeli military aboard the gunboat then made the threat that, when the internationals leave Gaza, you will all be made to pay. Human rights observers from the International Solidarity Movement and the Free Gaza movement have recently been accompanying Gazan fishermen during their work. The fishermen are constantly harassed, threatened, and attacked by the State of Israel, in flagrant violation of international law and maritime law.